Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Tucson Humanities Festival. My name is Alain-Philippe Durand, and I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities. Thank you for joining us. My esteemed colleagues have prepared these presentations to challenge and inform us, and perhaps help us seek better solutions to the problems we face in the world today. Now, please enjoy this presentation and visit our website, humanitiesfestival.arizona.edu, for the complete event schedule, as well as recordings of this event and future events. The 2020 Tucson Humanities Festival is supported by the Humanities Seminars program. The program offers premier adult education by top university professors from its home here in the College of Humanities.
Hello, thank you for joining me for the lecture on the audiovisual archive documenting freedom in Africa. So I got interested in this project while working on a book on freedom. It's entitled African Freedom: How Africa Responded to Independence, which came out with Cambridge University Press in 2018. And as I was finishing up that book, I was intrigued by the widespread view that freedom is a Western value primarily. And I wanted to explore that in more depth in an African setting to see whether people of African origin also felt that freedom was imposed from the outside, from the West, or whether it's something that feels, very organic and meaningful to them in their lives, independently of the West, and if we could have a sort of substantive debate of what the idea of freedom means. So I partnered with a Cameroonian filmmaker, Jean-Marie Tenault, to film a number of interviews, more than 40 interviews with professors, writers, artists, musicians, different kinds of folk, to explore this idea of freedom in African settings. So the project is Pan-African in scope. We have interviews with Nigerians, with people from the DRC, from Ghana, from Cameroon, from South Africa, etc. The archive is set up around an interactive map where you can click on a country, it opens, and then you can see all of the interviews that are there. And in addition to this interactive map, there's a search function. So if you're interested in national liberation, you can search the archive with keywords. And then there's also a set of digital resources. So there I created links to important documents in history that help us understand freedom in an African context. So there's a link to the Charter on African human rights and people's rights. There's a link to the Ouagadougou Manifesto of 2015, when citizen-led movements signed a collective statement about pro-democracy movements in Africa in the 21st century, and so on. So of the more than 40 interviews that we currently have up there, and it's designed to grow, so there will be more footage uploaded over time in this open access resource. But I wanted to give you some idea of the kind of material that you will find here. So just to go through the video highlights that you'll find on the landing page. De Valera Bochwe is a professor at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana, and he's a historian. And so he talks about the idea of freedom in its spiritual dimension, in its personal dimension, and explores the concept in West Africa from a historian's perspective. Then we have Mantia Diawara, who's from Mali, and he's a professor at NYU in film studies. And he talks about the idea of freedom in his youth as he was growing up, and how freedom was an idea that one would encounter in songs and was part of his culture growing up. So that's an interesting sort of reflection, personal reflection on on freedom, around the times of independence. Then we have Ruth Muram Badoro from Zimbabwe, and she talks about freedom from the point of view of somebody who studies governance and constitutions and democracy and these things. And so she's able to talk about the vernacular in Zimbabwe in terms of how people there think about freedom, and then to reflect on a relationship to Western ideas, Western constitutions, and Western political traditions. So it's very interesting to listen to her there. Then we have Tejumola Olaniyan, who unfortunately recently passed away, but he was a professor at the University of Wisconsin, and he's part of the Nigerian diaspora and a very important intellectual of our times. And he talks about the idea of freedom in relation to community, and he proposes that there are two kinds of freedom, attached freedoms and unattached freedoms. So attached freedoms would be the idea that I am free because I'm an American and I belong as a citizen of the United States to a community of Americans, and so my freedoms are protected by laws, constitutions, and so on. And the same thing could be said about a citizen of any country. Unattached freedoms are just basic intangible rights. Everyone has a right to be free because we're human. It relates more to this universal idea of human rights as an intangible, universal right. So attached and unattached freedoms, it's very insightful, his reflection on this aspect of freedom. And then finally, we have Rawia Tawfiq, who's from Egypt. And she talks about the idea of freedom in relation to the Arab Spring, and in addition, and in relation to the uprising in Tahrir Square. And she says that freedom, bread, and social justice were their slogans. So freedom was actually a slogan that was used by people in the streets in Tahrir Square in Egypt as a rallying cry for people to organize, to protest, and to advance the cause of democracy. So as you can see, there's a lot of nuance and different contexts and different perspectives and ways of thinking about freedom as a concept that is abstract, as a concept that's practical, as a concept that's historical, as a concept that's spiritual. So there's a lot of variety in terms of perspectives and contexts in the archive. I hope that this archive will, create a context for reflecting on freedom in Africa today and what it means. The variety of material here, we have students, we have accomplished professors, we have men, we have women. We ask them about what the difference is if you're a woman or if you're a man. We talk about different language contexts, Twi, Yoruba, Swahili, Shona, and so on. So there's a variety of languages, a variety of contexts, a variety of ages, and people coming at the idea of freedom from different points of view. It's very important to us to document underrepresented voices and to document languages that might not be widely known in the West. So from that point of view, this is a very valuable resource for people. It is also important to us to acknowledge the extent to which freedom is an important concept in the lives of people in Africa from across different contexts, and in a profound way in terms of their basic sense of self, how they relate to others in the world, how they think about their constitution and its relationship to British traditions, etc. So we hope that, looking through this material, you'll see that there's quite a substantive and meaningful conversation about what freedom means in Africa today. Another aspect of this project that's very important to us is to value cultural agency in Indigenous languages. So often we publish books with Cambridge University Press where we talk about novels and films mostly in French or English. And so this is an opportunity to dig a little deeper, to go beyond the novel in English or French or the film with subtitles and actually hear individuals explain to us what freedom means in their language and in their context. Another thing that's important in this archive is to allow us to have some evidence rather than just make an assertion that, freedom is an important idea in Africa. I'm personally in favor of evidence-based research. And so the fact that we can bring to bear so many different perspectives, so many different statements on what freedom means to individuals across the continent can allow us to have a substantive, evidence-based discussion of what freedom means in Africa from various different perspectives, whether it relates to geographical difference, languages, culture, society, the history of slavery, the history of colonialism, and so on. With this platform, we hope to democratize the study of freedom so that a wide number of people can participate in the conversation, so that it's a way of decentering the debate from, university towns or Western capitals to really allow a wide number of people to participate in the conversation and to listen to one another and to learn from one another and to observe the kind of variety that does exist on the continent. So there's not one kind of African freedom. There's a variety of perspectives that are very rich and often intersecting. Another thing that this archive does is it allows us to reconsider our priorities as researchers. So I think and hope that it will be less obvious to make an assertion that freedom is basically a Western value or that it matters the most in the West. We can see from this archive that there are emerging discourses on freedom and what it means to people on the continent in different settings. It's also important to note in concluding that this is an archive that's intended to expand. So we will be traveling, recording more content, and uploading it. So I definitely invite you to check it out at africanfreedom.arizona.edu. And I thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.